We have to. Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Kauffman, founder of the Institute of Coaching with Margaret Moore and Susan David. And we are all very lucky to be here today with Dorie Clark. And there's no way you're going to walk out of this half hour without getting some really good tips and support in how to build your practice. So Dorie is many wonderful things. One of them is she's the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Long, L-O-O-O-O-O. Thank you.
We get the prompt.
Long Game. She also teaches executive ed at Columbia Business School. But she's a fantastic writer, by the way. You cannot go wrong with getting any of her books. And she gets a bit of practice. She has written over 200 articles for Harvard Business Review. 200, exceeded only by 250 at Forbes. Really amazing. And I have two words that sum up Dorie. One of them is fortitude. The other one is when you read her books, every page has one thing in it, and that is encouragement. Encouragement for you, to encourage you, to give you cœur, which is French for heart. So Dorie, thank you for your fortitude and encouragement. And I look forward to you jumping in, sharing with our coaches things they can do for their practice.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. It's great to be here and have a chance to talk with you and with IOC members. And I appreciate what you're saying about fortitude and encouragement, because it's so true. I mean, the way that I came to a lot of the topics that I discussed in the long game is actually just the experience of building my own practice. I started consulting and coaching in 2006. And as I was working to build a practice, I realized, sort of to my horror, once I started, that I had never actually had to do sales before, do client development before. And I think, frankly, a lot of coaches are in that boat where, you might be very good at what you do. You might have had a lot of experiences in your past professional life about helping people, drawing them out. A lot of people come from talent or HR or what have you. They may have gone through coaching training programs, but the part of the equation that is missing for a lot of people is actually how to beat the bushes and attract clients to you. And I realized that if I was going to be successful, I didn't have a spouse or a financial safety net per se, aside from sleeping, in my childhood bedroom, which I was not so enthusiastic about. I would need to learn this. And so I really committed myself to a regimen of understanding what is it that you can do to make people aware of who you are and what you're capable of so that you can have a bigger impact. And hopefully the goal of that is that, you exert yourself in the beginning and do a bunch of things so that later on people are coming to you and you don't always have to be in the position of, knock, 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 looking for clients. That is what I committed myself to. It worked for me. And I have become a little bit of an evangelist about wanting to help other coaches figure out how to do it, because it can be just, so demoralizing to be great at what you do, to want to help people and just like, all right, but where are the people? So I really want people to be able to share their gifts more widely with the world.
Mm-hmm. What is your sense of what holds people back and what encourages them the most?
Well, when it comes to client development, I think that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in some ways, right? Because, I talk to a lot of folks, and oftentimes where people will go is that they feel like it's a little gross to have to market themselves. They don't like it. It feels inappropriate. And I think to a certain extent, it maybe feels demeaning. And so I think, but it's actually interesting because partly it's about, taking a stand that, no, I want, I'm a purist. I want my work to speak for itself. Partly, I'm going to be honest here, I think it's a little bit of entitlement that sometimes we feel like, I shouldn't have to do that. I'm good. People should just come to me. And I think that we all really have to just, take an ice bath of humility and realize, you know what? If people aren't coming to us, that's kind of on us, because people are busy. It's not their responsibility to figure out how great we are. We have to somehow get that message out there, not in a foghorn way, not in an obnoxious way, but in a thoughtful way that actually penetrates in a very noisy marketplace. And so I'm glad, Carol, if you'd like, we can talk about this in more depth. But one of the things that I've sort of figured out over time and have written about a lot is what I call the recognized expert formula. You know, how can you become recognized for your expertise, and in a non-obnoxious way? And ultimately, I believe there's three key things that we all need to be doing. One is content creation. You were alluding to this earlier. I try to practice what I preach. You need to put your ideas out there so that people know what they are and know what you're about. Number two is social proof. You need to convey to people rapidly that you know what you're doing, that you're a credible person. And your third is your network, because you need help amplifying it. Those are really the ingredients, and I think we all need to take responsibility for it.
Because also the whole point of your book also is on making this strategic. So you're not just sort of buckshotting out your content or your proof or your networking. But you know what I liked? Content creation, so people know what you are about. What I like about that is that's relatively ego-free. It's not content creation, so you think I'm great or I'm whatever, but it's like, it's almost a servant orientation. Like, if I'm going to be of service to you, this is my menu. And so do you want some? Do you want to talk more about that? I just love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've put your fingers on something powerful, Carol, which is that, a lot of people, they have this, sort of fear in the back of their mind that, that the minute they sort of lift their head up and do something, quote unquote, self-promotional, that, the world is somehow going to be like, oh my gosh, what a jerk. I can't believe that they're promoting themselves so hard. But the truth is, if you write an article, and the article, let's pretend, it's okay. 5 ways that leaders can be more effective at delegating or whatever. Is that promoting yourself? I mean, no, you're providing useful information. People can take it or leave it, but nobody, literally nobody, is going to say, oh, I can't believe they did that. Look at the nerve. If you are sharing your ideas freely and saying, hey, let me just put this out there. If it helps you, fantastic. That is not an act of craven self-promotion. It is indirect self-promotion, in the sense that it's like, you know what? If you like it, I've got more where it comes from. But that's really about it. And I think it's one of the classiest ways that we can promote ourselves. Now, I'm curious for you, Carol, was there kind of a turning point for you? Was there a period where, early on, maybe it was a little harder for you to find clients, and then something happened where it's like, oh yeah, now I'm getting a lot? Or like, what did that arc look like for you of kind of filling your practice pipeline, so to speak?
Well, in the beginning, I did absolutely anything anybody asked me to, no matter what. So literally, although I'd be very honest about it. So literally, I don't remember when this one, 2000, I don't know, 2 or 3, I don't even remember. Someone needed help and asked me if I would write a regular column in Financial Planning magazine on behavioral economics, to which I said, doesn't it matter to you in the least? I have no idea what behavioral economics is. And they said, you'll learn it.
That's right. You're a smart lady. You'll figure it out.
And then they asked me to do a talk on otolaryngology graduation. I'm like, I don't even know what it is. So I remember the time, maybe 4 years in, when I'm like, thank the gods, I'm now being asked to speak about things that I know about. So in the beginning, it was a lot of heavy lifting. People, no matter what they asked, I would just do whatever I needed to do to be able to deliver. And at one point, my motto to myself was, don't hold back. If I have an idea, just do it, unless there's a good reason not to.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really true. I mean, that is the arc in so many ways. I think that there's something to be said for it. I mean, in the early days of my practice, I was doing all the things, I mean, sometimes it is a question of homing in, it's sort of it's almost like throwing darts at a dartboard, and then it's like you're throwing darts at a dartboard, but you're not quite sure where the bullseye is. And it's through the process of elimination of like, okay, here and here and here and here, you can almost triangulate and figure it out. and you can say, okay, actually, I loved this assignment. I kind of hated this assignment. And so therefore, I now understand that my calling, the thing that I like best in the work that I do, is this thing here. And when you learn that, and sometimes it really is just a process of learning by doing, that becomes very powerful.
No, that's very interesting, because what you're describing is an inductive learning process, which is I try things, I look around and I see what happens. I think a lot of us have this false belief that only a deductive practice is going to work. Like, you're all going to be sitting there and you're going to like close your eyes and think, and then you're going to figure out what it is you want to do, as opposed to start doing it. It's a little bit like, in October, Herminia Ibarra is going to be our guest, and she wrote that book, Act Like a Leader, Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader.
Yeah, that's right.
Act Like a Leader. And at first I was like, seriously? And then I started practicing it. And that's what you're talking about, is just do it and see what happens. Start small. I like in your book, you talk about just sort of incremental, but also relentless. Just keep doing it, and then there's sort of inertia that will eventually pull you forward.
Yeah, I think you raise a really important point, Carol, because early on, especially, this can certainly apply to coaches at all levels of practice and experience, but especially for folks who are in the newer part of their journey and trying to kind of figure out, like, what do you do? What do you specialize in? It almost, people are just, they're either being curious or they're trying to be helpful, but it honestly can feel like they're like poking at you, like they're nagging you, like, so what do you specialize in? And you're like, oh my God, I don't know. Like, stop asking. And it's like very traumatizing. And so I think we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have the pat answer, to look like we have it all together. Oh, I specialize in, leaders at mid-market companies, director level or above, 50 million to 500 million in revenue. Like, you just make something up, and for some people, it feels incredibly constraining, because you literally are just sort of making something up, and you feel like, oh, but I'm letting go of all these other things that I'm interested in. And, for other people, it's just kind of like a weird random thing. And so I often counsel folks that I'm working with, and folks who are part of the, this online course and community I'm run called Recognized Expert. What I often will tell them is, look, you have to be kinder to yourself. You have to realize that even though it is emotionally comforting to have the sort of pat answer to give people, we need to live a little bit longer in the uncertainty. And, you can give, some sort of hypotheses, but think of them as hypotheses, because we often have to feel our way into understanding really where the product market fit is and where your skills truly align with what the world needs.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because there's a wonderful arc in your book. Like, I remember when I started out, my motto was don't hold back. And then at some point my motto turned into just say no. And how to kind of manage that in terms of like what you were just describing about the product strategy, marketing fit, and being strategic. What are some kind of hands-on tips you could give? Because a lot of our coaches are leadership coaches. They've got good practices, and they're now maybe at that inflection point of really going up and having to be more intentional and strategic. What advice do you have for that group?
Yeah, I love that you're raising this, Carol, because actually one of the things that I talk about a lot in the long game is the fact that, no one says this explicitly. So I like to try to make a point of calling it out, that if you are still saying yes to the same things at, when you're 30 or 40 or 50 that you were when you were 25, you have made a grave mistake. Because the truth is, every year, or certainly every few years, we need to continue to turn the dial and to tighten the lock a little bit on the things that we say yes to. Because as you rise in your career, you're going to meet more people, you're going to, have, presumably more success or recognition or things like that. And therefore, the number of people coming to you, the amount of inbound is going to increase. And early on, when you're first starting out, nobody knows you, whatever, like anything that comes to you, great, say yes. You should say yes, because you'll learn, you'll figure it out, and you got nothing else going on, let's be honest. But later on, when you're a mid-career person, certainly when you're a senior person, you have a lot going on. And if you continue to let other people set your agenda based on the inbound, that is a terrible mistake, because you never have the opportunity to do the kind of sustained deep work that is making your own intellectual contribution, as compared to just, filling random other people's needs. If you're going to drive your career and drive the contribution you're making, you have to tighten the criteria and get better at saying no. So I think that's a really important, recognition that you're pointing to.
So I want to make a comment on saying no. I have a really, really hard time saying no. The reason is, a part of me wants to say yes. It's not just that I feel socially pressured. So my own secret for saying no is I never say no. What I say is, I wish I could say yes. And I find that for some reason, I can say that more easily, because it's also the truth. But it doesn't feel like a rejection to say, I wish that I could say yes.
That's a really nice reframe. I like that a lot.
So more practical tips. So there's really tolerating the uncertainty. Tell us more about helping people be strategic, because you are essentially what you're many things, but what you are basically is a coaching practice development strategist. So talk us more about how people can think about their strategy going forward.
Yeah, I think that, just to pull back one step, because I think this is an important question. What got me started in many ways on this question is the realization. I was doing a talk at a conference back in 2018, I think, and I was asked to give a talk about strategy. And I started looking into it, and I realized that for me, probably the most interesting question about strategy was the fact that, on one hand, everybody thinks it's a great idea, right? There's not like an anti-strategy, block, right? Everybody's like, yes, strategy, great. But the problem is that almost no one does it. Almost no one takes the time. You keep hearing from senior leaders, and this is anecdotal as well as borne out by deep research studies. People just feel so rushed. They're like keeping their heads above water. Nobody really has the time for the sort of sustained strategy, which they claim is so useful and so important. And so I wanted to really get at that disjunct, like, what the heck is happening here, and how can we fight back against it? And so for me, really with the long game, what I was trying to do is to create a set of ideas, frames, exercises, things like that, that hopefully in small ways could help people on a day-to-day basis be able to shift things. Because, let's be honest, right? This is not about, oh, you need to take a 6-month strategy meditation retreat, go off to the Himalayas and you'll be fine. Like, that's not going to happen. But ultimately what it's about is taking the time that we do have, taking the small interstitial moments that we have, and just looking at things in a slightly different way, asking slightly different questions, and therefore getting better answers. And so for me, at the end of the day, what it comes down to, Carol, is just really continually having the discipline of asking yourself, what is it that I can do today that will make tomorrow better and easier? What can I do today that will make me, in 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, say, wow, thank you, past Dorie, well played. Like, that's what I'm after. And that's what I would like for other people to have as well.
I love that. I love that. So I think you and many people know that David Peterson died recently. And one of the things he did is he would talk about reflection. So his challenge to people was to have 1 minute of reflection a day. Just 1 minute. What did I learn today that matters? And again, start smaller, and then he builds and builds and builds from that. You have the 4 questions. Do you want to share people the 4 questions to determine whether something is worth doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for suggesting that. So one of the points that I make in the long game is that, the starting point of all strategy really is being able to have enough white space, enough like literally like unclaimed space on your calendar where you're not in meetings, you're not racing around, where you actually can just kind of breathe and step back. And so that involves being extremely diligent and vigilant about how to protect your calendar, going back to what we were talking about earlier and saying no. And the way that I started to think about it is it's the power of checklists. I mean, it is indisputed when it comes to airlines and airline safety. It is increasingly common when it comes to medical procedures, right? The doctors having the checklist. Okay, we marked the left leg with the Sharpie. I guess we're going to operate on the left leg, all of that. And a problem that I think that most knowledge workers, most, coaches, most professionals have is that when requests come in, we treat everything in our inbox as this kind of bespoke, unique query. Oh gosh, should I do this? I don't know. I mean, well, what's my relationship like with him? Will this damage it? How much, I don't know. And you go down this rabbit hole and it takes you like a half an hour to even figure out yes or no, do you do it? And then you probably still procrastinate on it if the answer is going to be no, because you don't want to say, it's so unproductive in so many ways. And so what I am suggesting for folks is that we adopt a checklist of 4 questions that we ask ourselves in a very systematic fashion every time a new request comes in, where it's not immediately obvious whether the answer should be yes or no. And they are, briefly, number 1, what is the total cost of this? And I mean specifically the time cost, right? Because I've often found myself in a situation where somebody's like, oh, can you do a webinar for us? And in my head, I'm sort of like, oh, that's like an hour. I could do that. And then I discover like down the line, they want like 4 planning calls and a tech check. I'm like, wait, how did this become a 5-hour commitment?
I've done that.
I bet you have. So total cost is number 1. Number 2 is what is the physical and emotional cost? There's a lot of things that I could do, but, once I look and I realize, oh, wow, I'm traveling the week before, I'm traveling the week after. And so, yes, I could do this, but it means literally I'm going to be gone for 19 days without being at home. And I have to like somehow figure out how to do my laundry. That doesn't sound fun anymore. So it's useful to surface that. Number 3, what's the opportunity cost? What else could I be doing with that time? We often weigh things like, should I do it? Should I not do it? The real question is, you got an hour, a day, however long it is. What else could you be doing with that hour or that day of your life? That frames it up. And the final one is, how will I feel about it in a year? Is it the kind of thing I'll regret not having done, or will I literally not even forget, or remember?
I really like that one a lot. Like, will this matter? Particularly if someone's asking you to do something that sometimes you have a sort of, I think of it as a generosity challenge, which is you give too quickly. So I now have a rule for myself: if I really want to do this, give this thing for free, I want to do it in 2 weeks. But I want to mention something about one of the co-founders of the Institute. You probably know Susan David.
I do.
Emotional Agility. And it was many years ago. She told me what she and her husband did every year. This was so bizarre to me and so fabulous. And I've never been able to do it, but I'll share it anyway. Because he also is her business partner. They sit down and they do opportunity management in advance, where they think about what are the most amazing opportunities that could come to us this year, and what are we going to say yes to, and what are we going to say no to. In advance, think about wherever you are, what are the things that could be coming your way, and think about it in advance.
I mean, it's good. It's good to war game this. If George Clooney and Amal want to have you over for dinner, but it's not the best night, are you going to make the effort anyway or not? I mean, I'm thinking yes, but it's good to war game.
Yeah. So opportunity management.
Very cool. I love that. And so, Carol, I'm curious. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, you're somebody that has, built a lot of things. You've built, of course, your own personal coaching practice. You've built the IOC and, have been doing a lot of really important work. How do you think about the role of strategy in your own life, in your own career? Are you somebody who kind of carves out specific time for it, or is it kind of more just like an ongoing frame? Like how do you do strategy in your world or in your life?
Mostly, I do it through talking with people. I'm really not good when I'm going to be alone in my room and figure out what I want. I've never been good at that. Um, the other thing is, what has really helped me a lot is being opportunistic, which is there's 20 things out there possibly coming my way and quickly picking the thing. But I'm just now at a point where I'm trying to shift. So, for example, I just wrote that book, which is right there, by the way. Whoops. Can't
There
do
we
that.
go. I love it.
There we
Real-time
go.
leadership, folks. It's awesome.
Like, do that back. Okay. And thinking, what is it that I really want to do with that? Because it could open up a number of doors. And then again, I can't quite figure it out on my own. So I did one thing and it was like, okay, big keynotes. That sounds like what you want. I don't find them that satisfying, but I think I shared you with this. So recently I just did like a mini keynote just for a senior leadership team, like the exco and the people that report to them. And I loved it. I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do. But I can't do strategy forwards. I really have to do it as you were describing, which is why I liked it so much, the inductive approach of I do it and like that whole thing. What you say is I can't remember exactly. It's great. Orient around interesting.
Yeah, optimize for interesting.
Optimize for this is interesting, energizing. I'm going to go that way.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Carol. I love it. And I think, for me, one of the underlying principles of all of this is just we have to hold things lightly. We're so, we as humans, I think, are so primed to just, take a thing and claim it as an identity as, really fast. Like, oh, I do this, I am this. And as a result, it becomes very hard for us to divorce ourselves from it. If it, even if it turns out that's not the thing you like, or that's not the thing you want to be doing, which is not incredibly helpful for ourselves. I think especially early on, the more we can treat things as provisional experiments and just say, you know what, I'm going to see what I think. I'm going to see if I like it. I'm going to see if it works. And then if it doesn't, we can let it go without feeling like we're somehow betraying ourselves or we're going to humiliate ourselves in the eyes of people. It's like, they're not even paying that much attention anyway. So we can just hold it lightly.
Yeah, the other thing, and you talk about this some in your book. So many years I was part of this Authentic Leadership Institute. And so I sort of got a sense of my purpose down, which was to discover things, that ignite excellence with people who matter. And what I would do is when an opportunity would come my way, I would almost hold that up like a card and say, okay, does this matter? So some people here know I was the editor-in-chief of an academic journal. OMG, hated it. Why? Because let me see, was it discovering things? Well, no, it was reading other people's things. Did it ignite excellence? Not really. Was it with people who mattered? Yes. But my job was saying no. I had to reject 98%. So it's like when I line up the opportunity with the reality and purpose. So I also found that to be, sort of part of that checklist is does it, and that's sort of like optimize for interesting. I think if you don't know your purpose, you always know what gives you energy. And that's why I think the optimizing for interest and energy is much deeper than it might sound at first blush.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's exactly right. It's a trail of breadcrumbs. It's just finding a way to guide yourself to the things that end up lighting you up.
Yeah. And I like someone here just also commented, Jill Berquist, of hold things lightly. Yes, orient to your energy. Have self-compassion as you figure it out. And my other motto, my business development motto is I'm not in control of my destiny, but I am in control of my probabilities. So I will just work on what will increase the likelihood of my getting to what I want rather than did I get what I want, yes or no. And then that really keeps me going, paying the probabilities rather than the linear.
I love that.
We have about a minute left. What would you like to leave us with? And also remind us where and how we can find you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carol. Well, for folks that want to go deeper, the new book is The Long Game. If you'd like to get a long game strategic thinking self-assessment, you can get one for free at dorieclark.com/the long game. And I'll also just say that for me, one of the questions that comes up a lot, and I think it's important to talk about it, because certainly when I was starting out, I felt like I didn't have access to this information. It's just like, how long do things take? And I want to be really clear. I had been in business doing coaching and consulting, I would say honestly, for probably at least 6 or 7 years before I was able to confidently articulate, here is what I do. Here is my unique value proposition. I did a lot of kind of stuff. And I mean, I was able to sort of articulate broadly, like I did kind of communications-y, marketing, position-y things. But it took 6 or 7 years to really get in the swing of it. And so we do need to be kind to ourselves about that and recognize that things take longer than we want them to. It's so easy to measure ourselves against somebody that, frankly, has probably been doing it for a decade longer than we have. And we're always going to come up short. We're always going to feel bad about ourselves. And that is not helpful. We need to recognize that we're running our own race, and we're learning. We've got to measure against that. And yeah, it'll take longer than we want it to, but the more we can just keep moving the ball forward and getting closer to understanding what we like, what we're good at, what the market wants and needs from us, the sooner we're able to really hit that sweet spot where we can help the maximum number of people in the way that you were meant to do.
Thank you, Dorie. So now everybody, you can see why fortitude and encouragement. Dorie just is a natural encourager, and thank you. So everybody, hope you have a good rest of your day. And Dorie, thank you.
Thanks so much.